Kayla Moore is a certified sex therapist and pleasure coach who supports women and couples to reclaim sex, intimacy, and embodiment as sacred, life-giving parts of their lives. Through her Connected Pleasure coaching practice and the Connected Pleasure podcast, she weaves together therapeutic training, nervous system-informed tools, and a deep reverence for the sacred feminine to help clients move from shame, pain, and disconnection into curiosity, confidence, and authentic pleasure. Drawing on a background shaped by strong female role models and a commitment to creating spaces where sexuality can be spoken about openly and compassionately, Kayla invites people into a gentle, grounded exploration of their stories so they can cultivate relationships with themselves and others. They feel intimate, empowered, and alive. Wow, there's a lot there. We were just saying before hitting record how important all of that is about being connected. And if it's okay, I just wanted to take you back a little bit, just to understand a little bit about your life growing up. What would your 14-year-old self think of what you do today? Would they recognize who you are and what you're doing today?
I think so. I think I've always been somebody that has really led from my heart and from my intuition. I've still had to grow it over time, but yeah, I think my upbringing is interesting for me. I grew up with a single mom, and I got a lot of role models around female empowerment, being your own self, and like making sure that you work in a space where you can support yourself and like be your own person. And I also grew up going to a Catholic school. And so I really started to understand spirituality from one lens, and then decided in high school that Catholicism was kind of like a cult and I didn't want any part of it. And really tried to figure out, what is spirituality? Is there a religion that's really going to sit for me? And I couldn't really find one. So I, was in kind of the, I don't like spirituality, I don't like religion era. And I dove into psychology and got my degree in psychology, and then became a licensed marriage and family therapist, and really started to understand the world from more of a clinical point of view. But I always felt like there was kind of a piece missing for me. And I did go, my master's program was also in a form of Christianity school, college. And so that was kind of dovetailed a little bit into what I learned when I was getting my master's degree. But just the way that we teach religion never really sat specifically well with me. So I, maybe like 2 years now, found what is called a sacred feminine community and joined it. And ever since then, I've really started to learn more about spirituality from a place of looking at who we are from within, and understanding that we ourselves have a direct connection to the divine, whatever that means for you. And so I paired that with the work that I'm already doing in really wanting to help women and all people, but especially women currently, in like reclaiming who they are, being able to look at themselves from a place of power and wholeness and divinity, instead of feeling so suppressed in our society. And, we were just talking too about your children. I also have a 3-year-old son. And as much as I really am like akin to helping women because that's my own experience, I really do think that men in our society have also really struggled and not benefited at all from the structures that we've had under patriarchy. And so my goal eventually too is to really help all beings, and especially couples, to really understand what does it mean to come back to ourselves as divine beings, and how can we start to heal some of those wounds that have been created by a patriarchal structure that tells men you have to be one way and tells women that you have to be another way. And come back to the fact that, again, like, we are all human beings. We are all here to hopefully love on each other, probably learn some things as we go along. But I truly believe that human beings are here to be kind and to love and to heal the wounds from our ancestors so that we can keep moving forward and keep evolving into a more loving and just and equitable world. So hopefully that answered your question.
That is a most wonderful answer. And I think a lot of things that you said then really resonate. I think one of the main ones is that somehow across the eons of society, we've conflated spirituality with religion.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of, and this is not against anybody that follows a particular religion, but I always think of sort of religion as almost it sounds silly, but almost the commercial arm of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I think because, as you said so eloquently, I think we all have the spirit and spirituality within us, and whatever we connect to, however we feel we should connect, that's what true spirituality is. And if you look back, it is typically religions that have fostered the notion of the patriarchy, and the notion that we should certainly fulfill specific gender roles and fulfill certain norms and act in a certain way, and we should, in many ways, repress certainly women, but men to a certain degree. And I think that's a challenge, really, that looking beyond that to actually, well, what does spirituality really look and feel like? I think is what's so important. So what would you say were the turning points that move you slightly from the sort of traditional therapy into more focus on pleasure and sensuality, sacred feminine healing? What sort of drew you to that aspect, do you think?
So in college, I minored in women, gender, and sexuality studies. And I also went to an all-girls Catholic school for my high school. So I've always had this like feminist burn in me and really have loved kind of taboo subjects. And then in my master's program, one of my professors was a licensed sex therapist. That was kind of her jam and what she did a lot of her body of work on. And I was just really drawn to that. I was like, being a sex therapist would be super cool. So I went down that path. It took me 8 years to actually get my certification after I graduated from my program, but I finally got it. And then kind of as soon as I got it, I decided I didn't really want to be a therapist anymore, which has been interesting. But I think, I'm not sure exactly what it looks like in the UK for you, but here, therapy has really gotten to a place where we are just ruled by insurance companies. It is completely about what diagnosis you have, if you can get reimbursed. There's so many therapists that just give diagnosis just for people to be able to pay for therapy, not because they even need them. And the way that therapy is viewed in our society is so low in value. We are like the lowest paid master's degree that we have. And it just kind of has turned therapists, some are lovely, but some are, they just feel really devalued. I feel like the community of therapists, we don't feel like we deserve a lot, and we kind of are just these martyrs that are supposed to just like work ourselves into the ground and not get much in return. And seeing like 20 to 30 clients a week is normalized, and that's like hours actually face to face with somebody. And we work in a like 40-hour work week, and a lot of people are like, well, that works out to, you see this many clients and then you have this much time for paperwork. But if you're a business owner like I am, it's a lot. And so there's kind of this conflict between people that take insurance as well, and people that decide, like me, to be private pay. But then private pay people tend to be like, our prices are pretty high because it has to cover like the entirety of my business and paying myself and having to like pay for all the things that I need to run my business and all the things. And so people look at that and are like, well, why are you charging so much when I can go over here and use my insurance and pay like 15, 20 bucks out of pocket? So just the whole, again, it's like the structure of therapy has become really hard. And in the US, we don't really have continuity around licensure. It's really hard to move a license depending on what license you have. We also have like, I think, a handful of different licenses, and sometimes licenses are called something different in a different state. There's just not a lot of continuity across our country of what it means to be this type of person or this type of professional. And so it really like boxes you in. And so I'm only licensed in Washington State, which means I can only see people in Washington State. And to some degree, there's like, you know, somewhat of an ethical thing around that depending on where you live, like people have different experiences. If you don't have direct understanding and knowledge of those experiences, then the way that you are giving therapy could actually be more harmful to someone than helpful if you're, you know, trying to lead them down a path that isn't actually helpful in what circumstances or environment they have. But still, it can be hard, especially in today's like global economy, to be so landlocked with what we can do. And there's a lot of red tape around all of that as well. So I just started feeling like this is not really the space that I want to be doing healing work. And I wanted to infuse more spirituality into my work. And not that it's unheard of, but it's still a little bit like you're going against the grain here. If you're trying to be a little bit more what we call woo-woo in how you are approaching certain things. And I think this is also a very important answer too. I have a really hard time sitting with clients and saying like, oh, you have anxiety, oh, you have depression, when I see the systemic problems happening. I've said this for so many years to all my clients of like, it's the system that we are working in. And I have felt so much like I'm just bashing my head against a wall because I'm like, you're working, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 hours a week. Like, no wonder you are feeling disconnected. No wonder you're feeling anxious. You're like tied to your phone. I've worked with so many people in like the tech industry that are just like on call 24/7. And I just see that like most of what I'm working with is not actually an individual problem like psychology would traditionally say that it is. It's more about the systemic issues that are happening. And I have felt like I want to address that more specifically in the work that I do and really try to change the system as much as I can versus just sitting with people and being like, yeah, I know it sucks. It sucks that we can't connect with each other. It sucks that we're like addicted to our phones. It sucks that we have like all these issues that we can't really do a whole lot about. And then it's creating all this havoc and chaos in our lives that then we're just putting it on the individual to figure out how to live through it and to navigate it. You know, there's only so many things that we as individuals can do before it's like really the system has to change. So I think that's also a big reason why I wanted to move out of the therapy model and into more of a coach. And then this is a new iteration for me, so I don't know if it made it into my bio, but I'm also on the path of doing training to be a sacred feminine priestess, which which a lot of people don't know.
What does that mean in practical terms?
In practical terms, it's probably easier to go back into time. So way back when, in your land has a little bit more of a blueprint for this than our very like toddler baby country of the US. But I always feel like, you know, we're such a new country. We're kind of like a toddler, just like throwing a tantrum, and uh, we still have a lot to learn and figure out. But before we had patriarchy, we had a society that a lot of the people were based around the earth and the different seasons and the things that we could get at the different seasons. So there was a lot of worshiping of goddesses,
Mhm.
not just, you know, patriarchal gods that we have now. And it was very much like ruled by the moon, ruled by the elements, and priestesses were actually central to the community. They would be in temples, and temples were like a pillar of society where people got counseling, they got health care, they got money to do the things that they needed to do. It was very much about reciprocity, but they were also spiritual leaders within their community. They were there to help lead and guide the community in a spiritual capacity. And there's different types of temples that would like embody different goddesses. And so there were different types of priestesses that would embody different goddesses and things like that. But in today's society, a lot of, at least the spiritual community that I'm in, a lot of people are being called back to this type of work. And essentially it's basically being a spiritual leader in your community, but also it's kind of, I see it as we're really, I think everyone, no matter who you are, how you think about the world, like we all know that we're kind of at this breaking point moment. We're all at a threshold moment where humanity is going to move one way or another. I believe we're going to move in a hopefully more positive direction, but a lot of people are very fearful that we're moving in not so great directions. I think both are true. It's just kind of where we feel like we're going to go. And so I feel like the priestess is somebody that's kind of holding these things in tandem. I'm holding the fact that the old is crumbling and holding this vision for the new, and really wanting to help lead and guide people in that. So my dream is to hopefully create my own temple in my community, which would mean being able to sit and hold people in the different passages that we go through in our human life, like going from an adolescent into a semi-adult. We used to have these rites of passage. We used to really celebrate the different stepping stones that we went through in life. And we still kind of do. We still have, like, you know, our marriage ceremonies, and we still have like graduations and some of those things. But it used to be really around who we are as people and not so much about like what we are doing in the world or like this status that we are trying to get. And so I would love to be somebody that could help like create love and continuity around some of those moments in life. As a mother myself, like really holding mothers as they are going from the life that they had before they were a mother into motherhood. I would love to hold people and like coming into a union together, whether that's like a spiritual union or if we still have, you know, actual like written on paper unions. But really just holding humanity in a place of love and care for each other. And temples used to, again, really be about reciprocity and community. And so I would love to like bring people onto my land to host big community dinners and be a place where people can just come and rest and be able to connect with each other. And then my big hope too in my work is, it's kind of what I've already been doing, but from a different lens. I've done a lot of work with couples, and I really see, again, from my spiritual lens, a real deficit right now in people being able to accept and love the feminine energy. So we have like the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and those are actual like pure energies. They're not actually part of what we think about in terms of gender roles in our society. It's really like, this is the archetype of the energies that we have, and we all have both feminine and masculine energy within us. I like to think of, because we are bred from both a sperm and an egg. And so when the rise of patriarchy happened, they pretty much ripped all of the divine feminine away from us. Again, we used to worship goddesses. Women used to be priestesses or like have high roles in society. We used to have like wisdom keepers and, medicine women, and just all these women that had so much knowledge and reverence in our communities. And that was basically taken away with the witch trials and all of that. Like thousands of women were killed. And then, we created a structure where men were at the top, women were at the bottom, women and children really are at the bottom. And everyone doesn't really fit in that society. Both men and women really are at the whim of whatever the top people want us to be at. And so I definitely see in especially heterosexual relationships, I feel like my generation we're just trying to like figure this out. We don't want the old ways, but we don't know what the new way is. I always tell my clients we're like flying blind here without a blueprint. And so many couples that I see know that there's a problem. They know that this is not the way that they want to do it, but we've still been so entrenched in our own upbringing in the more traditional style of relationships that a lot of people still have a hard time figuring out like how do we do this differently? How do we make this a more equitable relationship when we don't really have a way to do that at this moment? And so I used to think of it from more of a traditional like therapist lens. And now I see it more as, I feel like if both people were able to embrace the divine feminine more fully, women would be able to, again, be able to set boundaries for themselves, to speak up for themselves, to say, this is what I want and need, to be able to be free and creative and move into a place of leadership in the relationship, not so much leadership of like top down, but feeling like I have a place, I have a voice, I have something to give to this relationship instead of just always being the one being of service to everyone else. And men would also be able to like step back a little bit from this feeling of like, I have to do everything. I have to be everything for everyone all the time, in terms of like, I'm the breadwinner. I'm the one like holding down the fort. I have to be the rock for everyone, but without having any understanding of who I am in myself. That men have been stripped of their humanity because they're not able to really go into their emotional self and really understand like, who am I as an actual human being? And so allowing them to feel like the divine feminine is something that they can access then allows for us to then all heal the divine masculine as well. Because I think both have to come together into a sacred union. I do think that getting the divine feminine back online first is kind of the first step. And especially for women, a lot of women, once they kind of step out of the patriarchal fog and see like, oh, the system is rigged against me and it's not fair, which it totally is, and I totally get. We tend to get mad because rightfully so. Like, it's really aggravating, and there's a lot of rage that has to be expelled around that. But there's a lot of like distrust around men. And again, rightfully so. Like, we've lived and we still live in a world that is very terrifying to women in terms of our safety.
Yeah.
But we can't just stay there because, yes, has there been harm done? Absolutely. And like, we still have masculine within us, and there's still a lot of wounding of the masculine that has happened. And so I think the next step is like trying to come into compassion and love for both energies. And again, it's not like I have to love all men. It's coming into a understanding that the feminine is different from the masculine, and that's okay. And really, the divine masculine for me is holding a sacred container of safety. And I think for a lot of people, that would be a radical notion of what masculinity would mean, or divine masculine would mean. But I really think the energy of masculine is being able to be so aligned within yourself and understanding of who you are as a human being, that you're safe in yourself and then can hold this container of safety. And then it allows the feminine to be her like wild, creative self, and doesn't have to be as hypervigilant as the feminine has had to be for so long. And again, both of these are weaving in with each person. So even as a therapist, as a coach, as a spiritual leader, eventually, holding space for other people is what I do. That is really like one of my core tools in my tool bag that I usually use. And I inherently feel like that's a masculine energy to exude, that I'm like here holding the space for everyone so that you feel safe enough to be who you fully are and to, go through the healing journey that you need to go through. And coming back to couples, I just see that a lot of couples struggle because nobody really feels safe. Nobody really feels held. Nobody really feels like they have the room to be free and kind of have that feminine energy to create and do the things that they want to do, and also have the safety around them to be held in that. I just had like 3 conversations last week around this. And again, I really feel like it's because things right now feel so tense and so hard. And I really feel like we all just kind of feel like we're being squished right now, especially in the US. Things are just really hard, and people are craving freedom. Like, we are craving the ability to stretch our wings and fly and create something new. And that's inherently like the feminine energy. She wants to be free and wild and create. But then the masculine helps bring that like potential energy that could just go anywhere and really like hone it in and focus it and channel it into something that we can bring into the 3D world. So I haven't quite gotten like my whole theory around how I would do that with couples yet, but I do know it's very linked to the things that I've done so far.
Yeah.
And I really think that humanity really wants to bring both of these energies into sacred union and heal what has been so traumatic for so long. So my first step in that is really helping women, particularly, again, reclaim their own femininity through desire. My background, again, is as a sex therapist. And so I'm bringing both that kind of clinical knowledge into the space of sacredness and really helping women learn what has been for so long in your life around sexuality and what that looks like for you, and going into this place where you are held so you can shed the things that aren't working for you, the barriers that you have to really being able to claim that desire for yourself. And I really believe in community too, and doing this as a collective. And so I have a course right now that I'm developing called Sacred Desire. And it's really about women being able to rise in this together as a community. I think, again, in the therapy model, we've done healing individually for so long. And I think it's really time for us to all come together and feel like we don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
And actually talking about these things in a community, having conversations about sex, sexuality, being in a relationship with someone else. These have been taboo topics that people have not been wanting to talk about with each other for a really long time. And there's power in getting a group of people, especially a group of women, together to say, like, this is something that is hard for me to talk about, but I'm willing to step into this threshold with other women that are also willing to be vulnerable and do this alongside of me. So that's kind of my step in that direction of really helping women feel like they can access this part of themselves that has been told to them not to access. Just like men have been told to not be emotional, women have been told not to be sexual, and that that's just not for them. And that pleasure is really only for their partners, not inherently for them. And I think it's time that we change that. So I will leave it at that. That was a long, long rant.
No, it feels like a very, even after only having sort of talked to you for half an hour, it feels like a very natural step for you to take, if that makes sense. It just feels like a right thing to do. And it's super interesting. Well, everything says super interesting. We're talking about desire for a second. So
yeah,
I guess within a media, if you think about Sex and the City, you have sort of two characters. You have Samantha, who is very open about her desires, what she wants, and is very demanding and takes what she wants. And you have the sort of Charlotte character that's almost the opposite, is very sort of prim and proper, and I'm sure enjoys sex quietly, but would never sort of dream of making a noise or asking for what she wanted. So I'm not saying that all women should be Samantha or all women should be Charlotte or all men should be the equivalent. Not women should be whatever they want to be, of course. But how, when a couple perhaps come to you and there's a disconnect in terms of sex and intimacy, how do you go about changing the narrative? And I'm thinking especially if you have a couple that have maybe been together for 5, 10, 20 years, maybe you have some children, and things are different than they were when they first got together, and there's that sort of almost that sex perhaps feels like a chore, or oh gosh, it's Friday night again, I'm going to get this out of the way, or it's a birthday, or it's Christmas, or whatever. How do you get past that and get into the point where sex, intimacy, cuddling, kissing, whatever is to be enjoyed and desired, not something to be felt of as a chore?
Well, first I start with talking about, again, the patriarchy. We talk about, where have we been? What are the scripts? What are the narratives around sex that we have had? Because for a lot of couples like that, even if they're 20, 30 years into a marriage, a lot of them still have not addressed, like, what does sex actually mean to me? What schemas are we operating from, or what dynamics are happening in our relationship that are making it so maybe we don't feel safe with sex, maybe we don't feel like we're getting our needs met. So we really have to unpack, like, where have we been, and try to move into a place of pleasure is the measure. That we definitely live in a culture, again, around, like, orgasm is typically the end goal and what we are measuring our success around, versus it being whatever the experience is, as long as both people are getting pleasure, however many people are involved, as long as everyone is consenting and getting the pleasure that they want, it doesn't really matter what happens. We can have an orgasm, we can not have an orgasm. I'm definitely pro orgasm and help people have orgasms, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the end all be all, or like a pass fail that we didn't have a successful experience if both people didn't orgasm. So I think, again, like unlearning some of the things that we've been taught around sex, and especially for women, again, we've had a huge long history of shame. There's so much shame and like even disgust around our bodies, and feeling like we are inadequate in every way and not enough. And so a lot of it is, again, working on how do both people, because I've definitely witnessed this in men too, it's not just women, how do both people feel like they are enough in themselves, that their partners love them? Because most of the time, and I experienced this in my own relationship with my husband too, most of the time we are our worst critics. We are the ones that are telling ourselves the worst things, and we think our partner is going to think all of these things about us too. And yet our partner's just over there being like, you're amazing, you're gorgeous, I love you, I want to have sex with you. So being able to understand the difference and know that a lot of times it's just us and our brains. It's not necessarily our partner saying those things. If it is, then, there's a different problem there, but typically it's not. And then it's also, again, this kind of comes to the divine masculine, divine feminine, but I tend to find that men really tend to want sex more, and this is totally generalization. There's always an exception to this, but typically I see, again, in heterosexual couples, I've also worked with lots of gay couples and people all over the spectrum, but typically in heterosexual couples, men typically want sex because they are wanting connection in some way. That I really see that men, again, being stripped of being able to fully understand their emotions, fully recognize their emotions, pick out different emotions and express them to someone. The only way that men in our society have been given to find connection is through sex, because that's what they get praised for, even from adolescence. Once they start to be more sexual, they get praised for exploring that in themselves, where girls are kind of the opposite. And so I find in relationships, when men are feeling lonely, when men are feeling even stressed, when men are feeling just like disconnected in some way, they want sex because that's what helps them feel closer to their partner, which is great. But it tends to be like that's all that they are pushing for, and they aren't really looking at the other aspects of the relationship. Women tend to be on the opposite side of that, where they have been, again, conditioned to be more communal. They've been conditioned to look at the relationship as an emotional being and like really take care of the emotional side of the relationship. Again, at the detriment too that they don't have a partner that is meeting them there. So they end up taking on all of the emotional side of the relationship. And, women have been taught to communicate. We've been taught to talk to each other and get connection from that space of connecting more on like a mental, emotional, even spiritual level. And so a lot of the women are asking, like, I can't get into a sexual space with you until I have more of an emotional connection with you. And so a lot of times it's helping the couple spend more time together without screens, being able to actually communicate with each other. A lot of times it sometimes is, working just specifically on communication, like being able to hear each other and understand each other and work through a conflict situation in a way that actually resolves it and helps them feel more connected with each other than disconnected. And again, there's a lot of societal factors at play too. A lot of people are working way too much, so they don't have a lot of time with each other. They're stressed. A lot of, families, especially in the US, they don't tend to live near support. And so if you have kids, I mean, parents are just overworked and then come home and have to like make dinner, take care of the kids, do all the things. And even if both partners are really trying to share in that load, it's still like too much for just two parents to even do on their own. So there's a lot of societal factors there, but I try to help them find some time to connect with each other, even if it's like 5 to 10 minutes of talking to each other about their day, allowing for some actual emotional connection. And sometimes we really have to work on vulnerability too, because a lot of times couples have gone for a really long time without even feeling safe enough to really open up about what's going on for them. And so sometimes that kind of comes into working on communication too, is how do I be vulnerable about my emotional state? A lot of times we have to kind of weed through some of the harms and hurts that have been done in a relationship too. So it's interesting that oftentimes we're working on sex, but it ends up going into all the other realms of the relationship before we actually get to a place where people feel safe enough to enter into a sexual space with each other. And so then once we kind of get all of that on board, then we talk about, okay, what does sex actually look like for you? And again, going back to how do we make sure that everybody's getting the pleasure that they want and need? A lot of times, again, we're operating from a place of like, well, this is just how sex is supposed to be. And so this is just what we do. And we're in a routine, but nobody actually likes what's happening. So we get down to the basics of like, okay, what does sex actually look like for you? And what do you want it to look like? How do you want to feel in this experience? And making sure that we're not just, a lot of people will feel like, well, if sex isn't going well, then we just need to, what I call, up the ante and, go to a sex shop, get some more toys, or look into BDSM and all the different things that are like more on the taboo and periphery of sexual experiences. And all of that is well and good. And I love all those things, but we have to like attune to, again, how do we feel safe in this space first? And how do we actually know how to cultivate pleasure before we enter into all of that? So I kind of strip it down and get to the heart of what is the dynamic that we have in our sexual experiences? What is hindering us from being able to experience full pleasure? Is it, we need to set better boundaries? We need better consent. Do I just need to like know my body more so that I can tell my partner, this is what I like, this is what I don't like? There's a lot of different parts to that, but really diving into, again, how do we make sure that one, it's consensual, and two, it's pleasurable for all parties? Because it's not, a lot of people think, well, we have to have sex a certain amount per week or even per day in order for it to be healthy in our relationship. But it really does not matter the quantity. It really just matters the quality. If we have really good connecting quality sexual experiences, again, no matter what the ending is, typically then the quantity will go up because we're going to be wanting it and desiring it more.
I think that's one of the challenges that we perhaps have been conditioned to think that sex is penetration, and then penetration is orgasm. That is, that is sex. I mean, back to when we're young and we first start having sex. Even the words that we use are, did you have her? Did you give it to her? It's and I think if we and I'm in my mid-50s now, so as my erections aren't as rock hard as they were when I was 20, sadly.
Yeah.
And so if I want to make love to my wife and we want to have sex or and we want to have penetration and it's perhaps doesn't quite work, oh my God, we failed because that's it, we can't have sex. And it's that sort of thinking that actually isn't sex, if we replace the word sex with pleasure, as you said,
right?
And it could be brushing somebody's hair, it could be looking at somebody, it could be holding somebody's hand, it could be holding somebody, it could be stroking somebody's skin, it could be massaging somebody. All those things are sex as such, but
Yeah.
we've got this thing that if my penis doesn't go in her vagina and we have sex and I come and she comes, hopefully, then we've not had sex. And
Right.
that's the challenge, I think, certainly as you get all through life, that we sort of think, well,
Mhm.
because people sort of say, if you said to somebody, how often do you have sex? They were thinking, well, how often do we have penetrative sex? They
Mhm.
wouldn't be thinking, well, every day, because we hold each
Yeah.
other, we cuddle, we stroke, we hold, we shower together, we bathe together, whatever the things are you want to do.
Mhm.
And I totally agree. And I think that's one of the, I don't know whether danger is the right word, but I think the kink community, BDSM, has got a huge amount to teach the more
Mhm.
heteronormative community in terms of
Yes.
consent, discussion, conversations, all those things. Because when people have a BDSM experience, they will typically have a conversation about it before. What's a yes? What's a no? What's a maybe? What's your safe word? What do you enjoy? What do you don't enjoy? Whereas typically, if we have sex, we just have sex. We don't have the conversation. I think there's a huge amount to learn from that community.
Yes.
But I think the danger is exactly as you said. Well, you know, one day the husband says, "Oh, I thought we'll go out somewhere different today. Well, where do you want to go? Oh, we'll go to the sex shop and just let's buy this vibrator, these nipple clamps, this whip, this paddle, this mask, whatever. Right, that'll make it better." It's like cooking a meal and thinking, this is nice, but let's put more salt in, paprika, Tabasco. Let's just make it hotter and hotter. And it doesn't necessarily taste any better at the end of it. Terrible analogies, but you know what I mean? It's almost that we layer more and more and more on something rather than, as you said, well, but let's go back. I mean, even I think something you said was really, really knowing was that whole going back to our teenage years. We never taught or talked to the value of having a powerful and grounded sort of self-sex experience.
Yes.
In terms of when we're young boys or teenagers, we first find out about masturbation. It's like, wow, this feels great, but it's sort of it's hidden away. It's sort of in the bathroom. It's very quick. Oh my god! Imagine somebody comes in. The nightmare. How would that feel? It's the worst thing in the world could possibly happen. And it's very, very hurried and very quick. And we typically grasping our penis with a sort of chokehold, and it's very, very quick.
Yes.
We never get that. We never, and probably even now, there's probably lots of men my age and older have never just spent an hour exploring their own body. My nipples feel nice when I touch them. Does my cheek feel nice? We don't. We just have this thing back to teenagers. And I'm sure for women it's the same. So I think having that self-pleasure practice is almost a good start point, rather than going to the kink fair and the sort of sex shop. Sorry, I'm not sure even what the question is, but you know what I mean? Having that sort of self-awareness and self-love that we know what we enjoy ourselves, and then hopefully, as you said, learn how to communicate with our partner or partners.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And again, I think one of the narratives that trips people up is the fact that self-pleasure takes away from a couple's sex life, that if somebody is self-pleasuring, that they're taking away from the sex that they could be having with their partner. It's like, well, if I'm feeling horny, I should give it to my partner versus do it by myself. And I do think that mentality is harmful for the reasons that you said. And yes, just in general, we don't let ourselves and adolescents, I was going to say kids, but adolescents really explore their bodies in a way that is slow. Like you said, that is something that we teach in terms of if people are having a hard time being fully in their bodies, or for men, if you're having erectile dysfunction or like premature ejaculation, it's really slowing down that process and getting yourself to a place where you can feel what is actually happening in your body. And like you said, typically for young boys or for emerging men that are exploring their bodies, it is very hurried because we're like, oh, gotta keep it hush hush and not let anybody know that I'm doing this, even though I'm sure everybody knows that it's happening. And it can create habits where you're just going too hard too fast. And then sometimes it can create ripple effects down the road where when you're with a partner, then you don't have as much sensation because you're used to it being just one way. So that kind of gets into, the like dysfunctional world, but really just in general, I think it's so important for people to be able to slow down and really just be with your body, be with yourself, be in a space where you find love and pleasure for all the parts of your body. And I do think, again, too, a lot of times when we think of sex, we think of just the specific places that we know are part of sex, like nipples, vagina, penis. And we don't think about, like you said, like your cheek. We don't think about our neck. We don't think about like, what does it feel like to like run your hand or your fingers along your arm? There's so many ways to feel pleasure in your body that aren't just these specific spots that we know are traditionally sexual, that are so helpful in having a plethora of different sensations and different ways to find pleasure in your body that also help bolster the sensations that we feel in those like specific erogenous zones. Like our whole bodies are an erogenous zone, basically. And we can really, I think, get more pleasure if we start from a slower place. And that doesn't mean that we can't have quickies, that we can't like be super passionate in the moment and go for it. Of course, like we can have the whole spectrum of what it is to experience sex, but typically we don't allow ourselves to go super slow and explore all those other parts of our bodies and explore all those parts within ourselves, but then also with our partners. Like allowing your partner to just have like an hour to just like explore your body would be so nice. And also a lot of people have the fear of being the one that is having the spotlight on them. I think that's another thing I have to work on with a lot of the people I work with is how to feel comfortable receiving, being in the receiver spot, that a lot of us are more comfortable giving because it's less vulnerable. And being in a receiver space where we really have to like be fully in a trust position with the other person, that can be really scary and hard, especially depending on your background and what you've experienced in your life. So I think that's also kind of something that I work with people is how to be comfortable both giving and receiving in that space. And again, to me, it really all comes back to safety, of really being able to both feel held in a safe space and know that, when we say yes, it means yes. When we say no, it means no, but it doesn't take away from who the other person is in terms of like their value and their worth. I think a lot of us, when we hear no, we feel instant rejection. And that's a hard thing to move through in a relationship, but it's really important for no to just mean not right now. Like it's okay to be able to say no, because then if we're allowed to say no and it just be okay in what it is, then it gives a lot more room and power when we do want to say yes. So yeah, I think self-pleasuring, so helpful, and really just important for us to like know our own bodies before then coming together with another person, because then we could communicate about it way easier too. That we can say like, I know where I like to be touched. I know what it feels like to have all this different type of touch, and I feel comfortable with it because I've already done it by myself. And then I can explore what it looks like to have somebody else do it. So yeah, so helpful.
And I think there's that whole thing about saying no and yes and those sort of things. But I think it's often if we only had in our mind that sex is penetration, that's what it is. And most couples have one of them or both of them will have a move that they sort of make when they're sort of instigating sort of sex or whatever. It's sort of kissing somebody's neck or whatever. And sometimes when the person's saying no, what they're not necessarily saying no to is, I'm not saying no to pleasure. I'm penetrative sex right now. That's the
Right.
thing. It's trying to expand that thing, so it's not all or nothing.
Yes.
Which I think is certainly in I think in heterosexual couples that seems to be more of an issue than same-sex couples or couples where there's all those thruples or polyamorous relationships where it's a different dynamic. I think that's the challenge. It's almost like, oh, well, you don't do anything then. And like you said, men almost see sex as a way to get closer to somebody and connect more deeply, whereas women perhaps see the connection of being with somebody more deeply as a sort of precursor to the sex, which is a bit of a bugger, really, when we're sort of thinking sort of differently. And it's I think it is being able to have those conversations, because I've been married for 25 years or so, and we don't typically have those conversations. And I think one of the things that you said, which is really important, is perhaps the time to talk about or develop these things isn't when you're in the middle of having sex. If you suddenly, I don't know, slap somebody's bottom, or you suddenly pull somebody's hair, they're like, what the fuck are you doing? But perhaps talking about that before, well, I've thought about, would you try this or try? Well, no, I haven't thought about that. What about this, maybe? And that's when people feel very rejected, when in the middle of something happening, they think, well, it's all very passionate, it's all going very well. And you cover somebody's eyes or whatever. Oh my God, what are you doing that for? I think having that discussion in a safe space beforehand can be quite erotic in itself, but it certainly stops that feeling of rejection and that sort of turning your back on each other in bed, separate rooms type thing that can occur.
Yeah. I think it's hugely important for it to be outside of like an actual sexual experience, because we are very vulnerable in the middle of a sexual experience. And so I would say, I think you're coming at it more from like a consent standpoint. I would also say, like, in terms of just talking about the experience as a whole and what it was for me, what it was for you, what we would like to do differently or the same. I think that all should be like outside of a sexual experience as well, because again, we're very vulnerable. But yes, I think having consent conversations is hugely important. And in long-term relationships, in the beginning of a relationship, we're learning all this new stuff about each other and we're talking all the time. And then we get to a place where we just kind of think, well, we've done all of that and we don't really need to ask each other questions anymore. And which is, it's okay. Like, we don't have to always be diving into like a huge long checklist or questionnaire with each other. So it's okay to have shorthands. It's okay that, couples get comfortable with each other. But I think coming back to those things, especially if we're feeling like there's something going on here that isn't quite right, or we're having a hard time getting into a place where we're both feeling pleasure, coming back to, what does it look like for you to feel pleasure? What do you want out of this experience? I think having those conversations is really important. And sometimes we have to walk it back. I've had multiple times in my relationship with my husband where I'm like, we need to talk about consent again. Like, I don't want to just feel like you think that you can do whatever you want to my body because we've been married for X amount of years. And it's not in a malicious way, but it's just like, sometimes I'm not there and I need you to like ask me before you do that, and not just like assume that that's okay for you to do. And I also try to do it vice versa, but my husband tends to be up for anything usually whenever I want to do anything. So,
when you've been together for 20 years, the things that perhaps you did 20 years ago are different than maybe the things you want to do today, or things that you might have had something in mind for 1 month, 6 months, 3 months, 5 years you've always wanted to try, and it's almost resisting that temptation to suddenly blurt it out and actually have that conversation. Like, I've been thinking about perhaps this, I really wanted to try role play or with strangers in a hotel bar or whatever. What do you think? And just sort of almost having that discussion and not just assuming. I've taken a lot of your time, but there are two more questions, if that's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
one would be, so you've got a young son. I've got a son that's sort of 15, going on 16, or going on 25. I'm going to say.
Right.
And when I was growing up, pornography was a torn out picture from Playboy passed on the playground, and I was like, oh my god, there's a woman, she's got no clothes on. Oh my god, this is oh my god, this is the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
It ain't like that now. You can literally go online and find anything you can or couldn't ever imagine.
Yes.
And it's very different. And I try and talk to my son about it, and we sort of explained, not that isn't what people do, because who knows what people do, but it's there's more to it than this 3-minute clip. There's more to it than every man has a huge penis. Every woman likes to have sex with 2 or 3 men. Every time they orgasm, it's incredibly loud and passionate and exciting, and women and men do anything to each other. And I wonder, how would you advise having that discussion, or even when couples come to you and then the one partner says, look, a husband spends 2 or 3 hours a day looking at porn, and then he comes to me with this, or perhaps the woman much less so, but looks at porn and expects this. How do you regulate expectations, what reality is versus what? And I would classify, and I'm not anti-porn at all. I've talked to some really wonderful feminist porn directors that do holistic porn. It's beautiful, really incredibly long form porn. It's a good story. It's very sexual. It's very erotic. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Versus the Pornhub YouPorn type thing, which is almost like fast food porn.
Oh yeah.
You have something. I want more. I want more. I want more. You're never satisfied.
Yeah.
How do you? Yeah, porn. Tell me the answer.
Yes. I have the same viewpoint as you. I think I like to think of porn as just a tool. And yes, we can have some things that we get from porn. I do think that mainstream porn, though, it's hard to see the benefit of it, because there's a lot that is negative about it. Again, it's radical that it's accessible. It's radical that we're at least, I don't know, I guess it's not really changing the conversation much, but I would say, yes, porn is not real life at all. It is staged. It is produced. It is mostly for the male gaze. Like you said, there is feminist porn that is beautiful and is trying to like create a different section of porn that is more ethical, but it's usually behind a paywall. And that's usually why, because they're trying to be ethical. They're trying to pay the people that they have, really well, and also get people that are of age and can consent to this and actually want to be here. And so it's really important to talk to our kids about the fact that this is not real life. This is more specifically, again, for the male gaze. It's usually, we're seeing mostly just genitals and like body parts mashing up against each other, and not so much, like you have said, around what it means to be in a relationship with somebody. Even if you just met somebody one night and had sex with them, you're still having some type of like human interaction with a person that you also need to know how to like be a human in, and be, you're being vulnerable. Like having sex is inherently vulnerable, and that's okay. But it also means like we have to attune to the things that we need to attune to when we're being vulnerable in that way with somebody. So talking about the fact that this is not real life, this is not typically how sex is even happening for normal people, and that the tropes and things that they have in there are also harmful. Like there are studies that have been done that pretty much all porn except for gay male porn is all very like demeaning towards women. They still very much, put women in the submissive position. And, there's lots of porn that is actually like terrorizing women or whoever is involved. And so I think really calling that stuff out and saying like, this is not like, we are not dominating somebody unless they want to be dominated in a sexual experience. Again, unless you're explicitly consenting and saying this is a dynamic that you want to play out in your sexual experience with someone else, like that's not the objective. And so, yeah, it can be harmful to people. And it's kind of having to bring it out of this is what everything looks like to this is just what this is. And it's not real life. I kind of think of it as like reality television, that it's like we maybe can have like some affinity for it in some part of us, but we know that it's not real life. And it's more just for like entertainment and whatever people want to get out of it.
I think that's the key word. When I've talked to porn actresses and directors in porn, etc., and I think when I talked to this really really lovely actress, and she was saying the thing that they try and push is that it think of it what you will, but it is entertainment, not education.
Yeah.
And if you watch a John Wick film, you don't assume that you're going to walk to New York and see 100 people being shot in front of you and killed and maimed and heads chopped off, whatever. But and so think of porn in the same way, that it's entertainment. It's a made up story, and it's something that you might watch and enjoy in a certain way, but it's not a reflection of what you might see or hope to experience in real life, really. Unless you do go to a more cultured, more sort of thoughtful porn that exists that does tell a story, and it's very enjoyable and it's very very different. So my last question, I'll let you go, otherwise you'll be here all day.
I love conversations like this, so it's okay.
You're so easy to talk to, which is
I know.
work.
I know.
It's just so enjoyable. So a lot of the people that listen to the podcast are women, and it's like we have a 75% female audience, very heavily skewed. So if a woman's listening to this at the moment and resonates with what you're saying, I can't see how they could, but feels a little bit scared that it might be sort of too far gone, what's one gentle, concrete step that she could take this week to try and remember her power and return to her body?
One, I think knowing that you're not alone is really important. So many women feel that way, and there are like concrete reasons for why you feel that way. So knowing that you're not alone is really important. And then I think, again, coming back to the understanding that pleasure is part of the human experience, that nobody is so broken that we're just like, I just not going to be able to experience pleasure anymore. My podcast focuses on really infusing pleasure back into the world in all different ways, not just sexually, but in all aspects of life. And so I would say if pleasure feels really hard for you in the sexual capacity, focus on what is pleasurable in other realms of your life. Like, what does it feel like to drink a cup of tea in the morning? What does it feel like to go on a walk in nature and really like take in your surroundings? Pleasure, I've talked to almost all my guests that are on my podcast about what their definition of pleasure is. And we've really talked about how it's mostly being able to be present in the moment and experience the world through our senses. If you can really quiet yourself down and get into like, what can I see? What can I touch? What can I smell? What can I hear? What can I taste? Like really taking in your surroundings through your senses. Most of the time people are going to say that that's pleasurable. One of my guests that I had talked about how when it's a really sunny day and there's sun streaming in through the window, that she loves to lay on the floor. Like she'll just stop whatever she's doing and go lay on the floor and like put her shirt up a little bit so that the sun can radiate on her stomach. And that's like one of the most pleasurable things that she does for herself. And so pleasure comes in all shapes and sizes. And so if sexual pleasure is like, I can't even touch that right now, look for other ways to really feel pleasure in your body. And then once you're able to do that, then being able to get help from somebody, I think, is really the best thing. You know, we have lots of self-help books out there that I highly recommend. And even though those are great to read, sometimes it's like, well, I can read all of this, but it's hard to translate what that means in my own life and how to use that for me. Like my Bible that I go to is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. That is my number one book that I work off of. So if you're like, I just want to dip my toe into something, you know, reading a book or listening to a podcast like this, or like my podcast where we're openly talking about sex, a lot of times it comes to just normalizing talking about sex, having places, again, not like porn, but positive sexual conversations where we're talking about the entirety of sex and sexual experiences and relationships, I think is a really good place to start, just to start to normalize that within yourself of this is okay. It's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to listen to this. It's okay to like explore this in myself, and talk to friends. You know, some friends maybe better at talking about this than others, are more comfortable talking about it, but like having more open conversations about it, I think is really helpful. And then, yeah, if you're really feeling like I need some help with this, finding a professional like myself, that can help you navigate what you need to navigate through your healing journey to get to a place where you really feel like I know that sex is for me. I know that pleasure is for me. I know that I, as a human being, have a divine right to this. And it's just about me being able to claim it for myself and name it, and then figure out, you know, what's my pathway to pleasure. So I think that would be my recommendation to people.
Fabulous. It's very interesting you said that. I've suffered from depression for decades and come back and forth and on different medications and stuff. And I think a lot of what you said there is that I think depression itself is basically the stripping away of all pleasure. And I think, and what helps me massively is exactly as you said, finding that actually going for a walk with the dog in the morning, or having a cup of coffee with the sun on the back of my neck, or having something wonderful to eat. All these sort of almost micro pleasures are so important. And yeah, yes, when you're feeling very depressed, of course you don't want to have sex. You can't even think about it, for goodness sake. But I think rather than sort of thinking, right, I'm really depressed, right, I want to have sex, think about all these, as you said, just try and find, well, where can you find some pleasure? Is it having half an hour by yourself, reading a good book with a glass of wine? It's a wonderful pleasure. Or is it half an hour walk? Or is it 10 minutes in a sauna? What is there's something out there that's going to give you pleasure. And then from that, exactly as you said, then you build upon it until you're feeling, actually, yes, I am accepting pleasure back into my life. From those micro pleasures, hopefully comes more pleasure. And as you said, we have that right, we have earned that right to have intimate, connected relationships. So, gosh, you're great. You're so good. I really can't wait to sort of follow your journey into the sort of the priestess and the connection and creating spaces, and I think it's going to be a fabulous story.
Yes,
it definitely has New York Times bestseller written all over it. When you get to that place and you look back, you've already got a hell of a story to tell. So going through that into the next stage, it's it just feels that it's so critical to where our society might go right now. It's like we've had these things, and I was going to say in the Middle Ages in the UK we had all this. Then we had religion and the patriarchy decided that was wrong, so we invented these sort of witch trials and got rid of lots of healers and
Mm-hmm.
teachers and supporters and all these things, and you sort of hope that we're going to choose to branch off in the right direction. And I sort of have a feeling that we'll almost have two societies, one that carries the path it's on today, which is feels only the only possible destination is mutual destruction, which doesn't feel like a place to be.
Yes.
And the alternative, which feels like a better place, and I think that's what I'm trying to. Once children hit 16, 18, it's very hard to teach them anything. But trying to sort of explain to them that I don't really care what you do, job-wise. Don't think about a career. Don't think about money. Don't think about success. Your success is really, are you happy? Do you find a way to be happy with it? And I think that what you're trying to create and already have created feels very centered on happiness and true satisfaction, as opposed to sort of commercial societal satisfaction we've been told is a definition of success. So just keep doing what you're doing, please.
Thank you. I have a lot of theory behind me, and I'm also a nerd. I love diving into all things when I have a passion for something. But at the core of it, I love humanity. And I really feel like we have not lived to our full potential, and are creating immense trauma and harm to each other when we could just choose love and compassion. And I think, there's a lot of people there's actually not a lot of people. There's like a few people at the top that are making it seem like the world is like this. And yet most of the people around the world are trying to choose love and are trying to come together in community. And so I do think we're kind of at a moment where things are going to get pretty chaotic for a bit. But I do also believe that through the chaos comes the birthing of something new. And I promise you, there's a lot of woo-woo people out there that are really channeling this new way of being, and really wanting to help humanity turn a new leaf and be the beings that we were meant to be, to live in harmony with each other and with the earth. So
I think throughout history, we've almost needed a seismic event to make the big changes, and whether the seismic event now is the climate change or AI or whatever it is, but there is this major, and I find what I find staggering is that since I've been born, there's another 4 billion people on the planet. When I was born, there were 4 billion people. There's 8 billion people now. Only 2 of them are mine. I can't claim credit for it. But can you imagine that? We've got an extra 4 billion people on the planet. Not that that's too many, but just there are so many people that haven't lived long lives, and there's so much that they can explore. And I think people are looking for guidance and looking for places to go to and looking for retreats and harmony. I think harmony is good. People want to feel a more harmonious relationship with each other, with the earth, with our fellow creatures, all of those things. And it sounds very woo-woo, but it's not. It really isn't. It's what life is. Life is love, really. If you have love, do you need much more else?
I don't think so. I think love is pleasurable. And if we can be able to love fully and deeply, and then be able to create the things that we want to create, I really think we are inherently creative beings. We want to bring into the 3D realm like all the things that float around in our heads, but we tell ourselves we can't because we don't have time, we don't have the resources. But just imagine like what this world could be if we all could just create the things that we wanted to create. So yeah, I think love is definitely, I've always felt, the Beatles got it right. Like, all you need is love. That's always been one of my favorite songs. And I think I will just leave with this too. I think connection is so needed. We all know that connection has been very hard with the rise of technology and social media. And I just want to reflect that this is one of the best podcasts that I've been on. I really have felt so held with you today. And your just the way that you talk, the way that you invoke questions with your guests, the way that you are giving your own insight, but leaving room for your guests to answer the question. I have really felt so held in your presence today. And I feel like that is really what people are seeking, is again, like space holders, to feel like they have somewhere to just let go and relax and be themselves. And so thank you so much for doing that for me today too.
People are listening and not watching. I'm blushing now. Thank you so much, and I will. I'd love to stay in touch. I think you're really a really powerful, positive presence, and I think we need more of that. So, just thank you for all of your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.